All right. Thank you for joining us for this live webcast to review a summary of the significant features added in the version 11 release of Creo Illustrate. My name is Deb Williams. I am the Global Senior Sales Director in the Arbortext Business Unit at PTC. Before we get started, here are a couple housekeeping items. We do have the lines muted. We encourage you to use the Q&A feature at the top of the screen. If we don't manage to address your question during the conversation today, we'll follow up with you after the webinar. We are recording this webinar and we will post it to the PTC Arbortext YouTube channel afterwards. Thank you for being here. Let's start by briefly explaining this tool and its significance to the PTC digital thread. Creo Illustrate is a digital illustration tool essential in connecting engineering, technical authoring teams, manufacturing teams, and frontline workers who need service information and work instructions. Creo Illustrate version 11 helps teams turn complex engineering data into focused content. Here are the key topic areas that will be covered in this webinar. New options for insets, ability to modify 2D elements, support for layers and groups in 2D figures, ability to copy transforms between parts, and enhanced admin tool features. Sorry. It's very clicky. So again, my name is Deb Williams. I'm in the SLM segment for Arbortext. I am in Detroit, Michigan, and I have been here at PTC for 10 years. I am joined with Jeff Kuhn, Director of Visualization Strategy at PTC. Jeff will share the key functionalities and updates on Creo Illustrate version 11. Adrian Garland has also joined us. He will be helping with the Q&A. Adrian is a Principal Technical Product Manager in Visualization. All right, let's briefly talk now about the digital thread and what it means to you, the end user. The products you manufacture are central to your business. They represent your brand and how you make money. Value comes from digitally transforming how they are engineered, manufactured, and serviced. It is important you get it right because successfully navigating digital transformation is one of the most significant factors for competitive advantage, financial success, and delivering a higher level of value to your customers. This could mean the difference between winning and losing. Unfortunately, the complexity of products and processes and disconnected data and systems bring problems that hinder the digital transformation initiatives. They create delays in product development and significantly impact quality and customer satisfaction. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the concept of a digital thread, let me provide a little more detail. A digital thread is an interconnected flow of relevant data that defines a product through life cycle from design through manufacturing, service, and retirement. Let me show you how product data flows through the digital thread to unlock value. Products come to life digitally first in engineering. This is where you build the foundation and begin filling your digital thread. Here, your PLM system is a critical part of the infrastructure that is needed to support the digital thread across the enterprise. Connecting design and requirements, particularly for the complex products with integrated software through your PLM system, is key to reducing risk and building quality products that meet your customer needs. And it is the product data that flows through the life cycle and as it gets reused and enhanced to meet the needs of the users at each stage. In manufacturing and service engineering, product data is leveraged and transformed to drive derivative works such as process plans, work instructions, and quality specifications. The tight collaboration in engineering allows changes that can be made faster and significantly lower costs since the product is still digital. The digital thread can extend beyond the enterprise to suppliers, improving communication and taking time latency out of the supply chain. As we move further downstream, the rich data that was created in engineering are leveraged in the systems that manufacturing operations and quality control to complete their daily function and build the product. As the product makes its way through production, feedback loops allow non-conformance and low first pass yield information to flow back upstream to engineering to inform design and quality improvements. And once those products become physical and make their way to the customers, they need to be operated, serviced, and sustained. Here, the forward propagation of product data helps make your service processes more efficient and your customers happier. It simplifies the creation of accurate, up-to-date technical information, service instructions, and parts catalogs, saving time and improving productivity. The digital thread can also connect your SLM and CRM systems to effectively manage that asset over the course of its service life. If you have IoT strategy and smart connected products, you can continue to gain insight from customer usage and performance data. And when the product reaches the end of its useful life, parts and components can be recycled, remanufactured, refurbished, and reused because you optimize for sustainability and circularity during the design phase. This continuous sharing of information from the left-hand side to the right-hand side and back means the stakeholders across the product lifecycle benefit from the digital thread. The Creo Illustrate tool that we are talking today does represent and is part of that model-based digital thread for service. And with that, I will hand it over to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Deb. So, and thank you to everyone for joining. What I'm going to do is go through some of the new capabilities that are available in Creo Illustrate 11 that was released early last month. And with some of those, I'm going to be jumping in and out of the product itself, giving some live demonstration. As we go through it, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section. But please make sure that they're on the topic that we're covering at the time. If you have additional questions and want to have some deeper conversations and that kind of thing, please reach out to your sales teams, and they will be more than happy to pester me and set up some meetings, and we can have those deeper conversations. So with that, let's get started. So here's the list of the major new things that are in Creo Illustrate 11. I'm not going to read through this because we're going to discuss each one of these in a bit more detail as we go through this presentation. So with that, first up, we have support for layers and groups in 2D. So we've had support for 3D layers and whatnot on the 3D side of things, but there was no 2D layering or grouping capabilities in Creo Illustrate for the 2D figures that you can create. So with this release, we now have that ability. For the layers, you have the ability to obviously create layers, and we automated some of this as well. So if you have callouts, if you have inset views, things of that nature, we will automatically generate layers and separate things out onto layers. And I'll demonstrate some of that here in just a second. You can manually create and delete layers. You can control their visibility, whether they're locked. Do you want to have a color so that you can easily identify what's on what layers? And you can also control whether or not a particular layer is publishable. So do you actually want the content of a layer? Maybe you've got some construction geometries that you put into place that you don't necessarily want exported as part of your finished product when you do publish this content for consumption in the digital thread in other places. Now, along with the layers, we do have the ability to have groups. Again, we automated as much as possible. So coming from 3D content, as you can see here in this image, we generate groups to encapsulate the various geometries that are associated to the individual parts that came from the 3D. Now you still have control over grouping and ungrouping. You can create new groups. You can create nested groups. You have the ability to control visibility. There's Z stacking, so you can move groups up and down and all kinds of things like that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into Creo Illustrate. So here's, this is a live 2D image that's already been generated, but I've got a layer function here now. And if I select a layer, it will auto-populate with content. And this has, the standard split window that we have inside of Creo Illustrate. But this is selectable bidirectionally. So I can select something here in this grouping structure. You see it highlights out here on screen. If I select a part out here, you see we scroll and dive to wherever that component is. So it gives you that flavor, so to speak, of still being in that 3D space where you have an actual structure that you can interact with, as well as, having things still be contained. Again, you can come in here and right click on things. You can create groups. You can rename the group. You can create duplicates that are either linked or unlinked. Basically what this is if you duplicate a group that has a link back to the 3D CAD, it'll still have that link. So if the CAD updates, so too will this the next time you refresh it. You can hide and unhide, send things backwards and forwards, and you can move things between layers. So depending on what layers you have available, you can see up here, I've got background and call out. I could move it directly to there if I wanted to. Now there's also a group ribbon that has a lot of these same tools. So as you can see here, and we try to do things relatively intelligently. So I can send this one to back, but not forward because it's already at the top of the stack. If I go to the one at the bottom, you can see that reverses. And if I go to one in the middle, well, I can go in either direction. So it is aware of where the component is in that stacking. And again, I can do the hides, I can ungroup, do the duplicates, rename, all of that stuff here as well. Or I can just straight up delete the group, in which case the group and all of its geometry goes away. So a lot of enhancement there. Some of the other things that we can do are related to like color. So I can turn on the layers color, and you can set this so that right now anything on the callouts layer is red, and I can disable that. I can also hide a layer, and I can lock it so that I can't make changes to any of the content on it. And then the last one is that layer publishable or not? And if I go down here, and excuse me, this also allows you to hide, individual components. So like this shell, I can hide it. And you can see we extend that column for whether something is hidden or not down here so that I can go through and hide whole assemblies, individual parts, that kind of thing. However I want to do that interaction. So, but this is sort of the quick view of what we've done in layers. There are some other things that you can explore and find out about. The help topics have all been updated to give you a deeper dive into how all of this works. So I encourage you to explore it, assuming that you have 2D information that you're still working with. So with that, Adrian, do we have any questions on layers and groups?
We do. One question at the moment, which is, are groups only created from 3D groups or other conditions such as patterns or same part number?
Now, today, this creates groups based on the individual instances of parts. So whatever the hierarchy of structure is on the 3D side, we'll have that same hierarchy of structure on the 2D side. So you can see the relevance here. If there are other automated requirements that you have, this is one of the areas that I'd love to have some discussion about and explore the possibilities and what additional things you might want this to do. But for today, this basically replicates the BOM structure as a hierarchical grouping structure on the 2D side.
That's the only question at the moment.
Okay, excellent. So we will switch back to the slide deck. So this next one, we've added some additional tools for 2D. So these are pretty straightforward. There's now a proper rotation tool so that you can select geometries and rotate them, whether they're just individual lines or are group parts, that kind of thing. We've also added the modify tool. So this is where you would go to, say, add or remove Bezier handles, segments from polylines, points and things of that nature. So if you're not deleting the whole line or a segment, so to speak, but you're able to modify Beziers and polylines. And then the convert tool, in essence, this is kind of the smash tool in some other applications where you can convert ellipses down to Beziers, polylines, or lines, Beziers into polylines and lines, and then even rectangles into polylines and lines. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. It's just part of our continuation of adding more and more 2D capability into Creo Illustrate to give you a broader spectrum of capabilities across whatever your illustration requirements are. So any quick questions on this one?
No questions at the moment.
Okay. And we will continue on. So this one, for all you admin types out there. So we've enhanced the admin tool to allow you to use Windchill as a location to store the standard. Now, you can consider this kind of step one on this particular journey. What this is actually doing is it's just taking that zip package and it's now giving you the ability to store it directly in Windchill, at which point it can now be, managed. So you can check it in, check it out. It has iterative values, that kind of thing. And you can specify where in Windchill you want to do this. There is no special requirement for a version of Windchill other than it needs to be supported by Creo Illustrate 11. So check with your graphics compendium to make sure that you have that compatibility. One of the reasons it doesn't require a special version of Windchill is, again, we're just saving this file inside of Windchill. You need to specify where you want it to go, and then we will resave it, so to speak, back to that location, allowing you to check it in and out as required. And then you would point your individual desktop users at that same location. And now whenever you publish a standards update, they pull it down. We also changed the file extension from zip to PVSF. This is a PTC visualization standards file. The reason we did that is we didn't want this file to get lost in Windchill with all the other zip files that are there. So in order for Windchill to know that this is not just a normal zip file, which technically speaking it is still just a normal zip file, we changed the file extension to PVSF so that Windchill knows. So if you go to a folder to save one of these, you'll only be seeing the other PVSF files as opposed to all the zip files, that kind of thing. The other part of this is that if you're not using Windchill, you can still specify a common location and save to there. So if you've got a shared file server where people can access, you can have this automatically save your changes to that location. And then again, you just point the individual desktops at that place and they go and collect it. Part of this is just to make it a little bit easier to do sort of a shared preferences kind of thing. There's still more work for us to do. We want to take better advantage of the capabilities of Windchill to, have a proper control of libraries and things of that nature. But this will still allow you to have that shared location and start using Windchill as a place to control how you're deploying the standards. So any questions on this one?
We do. We have a couple.
Okay.
Are the standards controlled by ACLs? And the other one is only admin control?
So basically Windchill, you can apply whatever controls Windchill allows you. This is purely just a file. So if you want to have the individual that is responsible for managing the standard, obviously they need, in essence, write capabilities for this. But you can set everybody else to only have read. Now, they're not using this standards file live from Windchill. What happens is the local user, if there's a change in Windchill, Creo Illustrate has the same response. Hey, there's an update to the standard. It will pull it down and update the standard on the local machine. So they only need read capability. So, but Windchill is responsible, as it always is, for who has permission to do what. So however they have, whatever permissions you allow that individual to have, whether you're doing that through groups or, on a person by person basis, you can apply those locks, so to speak, to whatever, to these standard files in Windchill. So the standard rules apply in that case. But it is up to you to say these people can or can't have access to this.
Okay, there are a few more questions.
Okay.
From which Windchill version this can be managed?
That can be any version that Creo Illustrate 11 supports, which I believe, I know it's back to at least 1203. But to be honest, off the top of my head, I don't remember if this one still goes back to 11.1 M30 or not.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I would have to check.
Yeah. But if you go to the graphics compendium, basically our compatibility matrices, just look up Creo Illustrate 11 and any of the versions of Windchill that are listed there that we support would be capable of doing this. Because Windchill itself isn't doing anything special, this is just a zip file as far as Windchill is concerned. And that's why you can apply any rules for controlling who is allowed to do what. It's just a standard Windchill function in that case.
Okay, a few more questions there. They're coming in on this one.
Okay.
I believe we can share more than one standard based on the name through more than one organization.
Yeah, so this you can, as you see here in this screenshot, in Windchill Horse, which is one of our build names, there's 3 different standards being shown there, with each with their own version. So for each, I'm trying to. It almost feels like the second Monday of the week. I'm not remembering the name off the top of my head, but for each area that you have in Windchill, like if you've got, different products broken out, you could have a different standard in each one of those. The only requirement is that you tell the desktop Creo Illustrates where those files are, and they can be anywhere. Like even these 3 files here, they could all be in Horse, but they could be in completely different locations within Horse. They don't all have to be in the same place. So if you've got things separated out by product or project or things of that nature, you can save these files basically anywhere within Windchill you want. And it doesn't even need to be one wind chill. If you've got multiple wind chills, you could, as long as you have access to them, you could save multiple standards across multiple wind chills. You just need to tell Creo Illustrate where they are.
Okay, next question. I think you might have covered this one, but can you have different configuration for different users?
Well, you can have a different standard. Again, that you're just pointing that user at a location that has the standard you want them to use. So in an instance like that, you might, even if you have like say one project in Windchill, you could have a couple of subfolders somewhere for different types of, you know, standards. You might have one for service graphics versus manufacturing versus parts list, you know, that kind of thing. And so that they don't see the others, you could just put it in their own folders in Windchill and then just point those users at the right folder and be able to control it that way. Again, we want to get more sophisticated in the future, but for right now, there's a little bit of manual process to set it up, but then, you know, you've got the capability of iterating the standards and making sure that the users are getting the right standard.
Okay.
Anything else on this one?
No, they're still coming in. I assume org or site role is needed to store it there.
The individual that's running the admin tool has to have permission to write to the location in Windchill. As long as they can write to that location, they're fine. You know, they can check it in, they can check it out, they can modify it, they can, you know, check it back in, those kinds of things. Now, you may need a Windchill admin to get you set up with a place to do that and to make sure that all of your users and all of your Creo Illustrate admins have the proper permissions. But the person doing this work that's creating the standards and saving the standards and that kind of stuff, they don't need to be a Windchill admin. They just need to have the Creo Illustrate admin tool installed on their local machine, which, if you're not aware, when you install Creo Illustrate, you need to go through the advanced options, and at the bottom of the advanced list of capabilities, you'll see the admin tool at the very bottom. Just make sure that that gets installed, and then the user will be able to use the admin tool to do any of this. So hopefully that answered your question.
Last question at the moment. Are there any prerequisites for converting old standards into new standards, or does nothing need to be done?
Nothing really needs to be done. When you resave it, it's going to be resaved as a PVSF file. But yeah, just open it up, tell the admin tool where it is you're saving it, whether that's in Windchill or a shared file server or your local machine if you want to. But there isn't anything you need to do to, you know, to reuse a current standard that you have, other than open it up in the admin tool.
That's it for now.
Awesome. All right. So next up, we've added some styling for text in Creo Illustrate 11. So as you can see here, you know, in note boxes, and there's a few other places I'll get to in a minute. You have the ability now to bold, italicize, create bulleted lists, those kinds of things. There's more stuff we want to do as we go along, but this is for those that need this kind of flexibility within the graphical space. If you're using the sequencer, we haven't yet updated like the step note to be able to do this, but that's something else that's on the roadmap at some point in the future to be able to add. But this allows you to do bold, italicized, bulleted lists. There's also the idea of the header versus content. So you can set up a preference for you know, what does the header part look like and what does the content part look like as far as font sizes and that kind of thing. So you can have, sort of that bolded look for the headers, and then the rest of it is content. Like it says here, this is currently limited to callouts and notes, with the exception of there's some stuff we added to insets, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So do you have any questions on this capability? And this does publish out, so if you publish to 2D and whatnot, as formatting goes.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted then. No questions on this one, just a statement on the last one to say this was cool, much better share capabilities.
Yeah. I would agree that, as someone who used to admin a group, that was one of my favorite enhancements, is to make that a bit easier. All right. Next up. So we now have captions for inset views. So basically you can now apply a label. And with that label, you also have the option to do, bold, italicized, bulleted lists, and header versus content. You have the ability to specify where in relation to this you want this to be. And what is available changes based on the shape. Like if you're using a circle, left and right doesn't make a lot of sense because there's just, the top, bottom, that kind of thing. So you also have the option to do a margin, and this margin actually even allows you to bump this into the line. So it's pretty flexible in that capacity. But again, you can specify font sizes, the borders and stuff we've had for a bit, but this allows you to, start labeling what these inset views do. Now, as far as the inset templates go, you have the ability to say that you want this, and you can specify, inside, outside, bottom, whatever. But there's no pre-population of information because we have no idea what you want this to be. So if you have requirements around data that is accessible by Creo Illustrate that you would want to auto-populate, like I said, reach out to your sales team to set up a discussion so that we can investigate what that is and see what we can possibly do to enhance that. So any questions on this one?
Not at the moment, no.
All right. Another inset one. This kind of goes back to defining, proper templates and standards again. But with this one, you can now pre-specify sizing. So if you want to have your inset view be a fixed size, you can say that. Regular is just what we have now, where you just dynamically, say what it is you want it to be when you do it. Or you can do a fixed scale, at which point it does a percentage, or gives you a percentage value. So that is the updated capabilities there. And that scale, as you can see here, is compared to the original location size. So in essence, if you say, 200%, this will be 200% larger than the target that you came from, that kind of thing. So it's pretty straightforward in how it works. But again, you can specify this stuff in the template along with the new caption options, and that way you can even specify a couple of different sizes or shapes or whatever, and have better control over how your inset views look. Any questions on this one?
No, not at the moment.
All right. So this one here I know has been requested for a bit. The ability to copy transforms between parts. So what is this? Basically, if you've already moved a part in the 3D space, and now the engineers did something like added more bolts, or say you moved a bunch of things and you forgot that one washer, or it didn't get picked up when you did your selection. How do you move it? Well, you now have the ability to select a part, copy its transform, and paste it to another part. Doesn't have to be the same part number. Doesn't even have to be in the same figure. You can actually copy the location from one figure and paste that location basically into the other figure. Now, the transform itself is not an absolute transform. So basically what we're copying is that you moved it on the X, Y, or Z, or all three, X distance. And then when you copy or when you paste it onto another part, we look at that other part and we apply the same X, Y, Z distances to that part. So it's not going to show up in the same location as your original part that you copied. It's going to show up in the location relative to the new part that you applied the transform to. And the little dialog box you see down here in the bottom, copy all transforms from and to. You can select multiple parts and just move them all at once, that kind of thing as well. So any questions on this one?
No,
Seeing a
not so
thumbs
far.
up from Mike. All right. Yeah, this one is pretty straightforward. And like I said, I know that there's been a few of you that have asked for this. So you finally have it in 11. This one here, this is one of those things that for whatever reason we missed it, but wanted to make you aware. So for those that have not been aware that it is possible to apply a recipe file or in essence rules for how your geometry gets optimized when you export to 3D coming out of Creo Illustrate. So if you're publishing to a PVZ for 3D consumption, you have the ability to apply a recipe file to reduce the file size, optimize the geometry, remove metadata that you don't want getting out, all those kinds of things. Now, we've always shipped, or at least for the last few years, have always shipped this low, medium, and high TVS Optimize with every installation of Creo Illustrate. What we failed to do was actually included in the standard. So if you do a new install, you'll now see these show up by default inside the standard. And in Creo Illustrate itself, if you go into the publishing options for 3D content, under configuration, the drop-down list will be pre-populated. So not sure why we didn't do it before. It's just one of those things that none of us had thought about needing to do. So this is just a quick little cleanup thing, but I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware. When you do a new install of 11 and you're not using one of your own recipe files, now the default comes with these three options in it. And if you need to know more about recipe files or want to know more about recipe files, again, reach out to your sales team. And they know some really smart folks that can help you understand and set up your proper recipe files to achieve what it is you want to do. So any questions on this one?
No, not at the moment.
All right. So last but not least is other updates. So we did some infrastructure work, and in essence, we've removed the last components of Internet Explorer. Basically, this was being used as the authentication capability between Creo Illustrate and Windchill. So being as Microsoft has end-of-lifed Internet Explorer, we have switched over to the Edge functionality. So with Creo Illustrate 11, if you're connecting to Windchill, you'll notice that the login dialog looks different than it used to because it's now using the Edge dialog as opposed to the Internet Explorer dialog. It shouldn't impact you other than it's now using something a bit more modern. The other nice thing about this is that as Microsoft pushes updates for Edge, that login capability gets those security patches and whatnot, even if you don't update Creo Illustrate. So it's not a major change, but I wanted you to be aware of it so that if you install 11 and you're wondering why your dialog looks different, this is why. Any questions on this one?
No.
All right. So with that, we have what, 4 minutes? Do we have any other questions that have come in relative to Creo Illustrate 11?
Yes, this one just come in.
Okay.
Can the recipe files be accessed from a network location? How do you update the initially installed recipe file? Two
So
questions, sorry.
yeah, no, that's fine. So as far as location is concerned, basically when you go into Creo Illustrate and you add a recipe file to the standard, it's not in that remote location anywhere. We actually bring it into the standard. So if you're using Windchill or a shared server to distribute your standard, that recipe file is contained within that zip pack. So if you change that, the recipe file itself, you would need to re-add that or update it inside your standard. And then using the new sharing capability in 11, you could push that back into Windchill or push that out to your file server, and then everybody that's connected to that location would then receive the update for that recipe file. So it's not managed independently in that regard. It's part of the standard, which also means that you could have different recipe files for different projects and stuff like that. Because it is part of the published rules, basically. And I forget what the second question was, Adrian.
Yeah, so the second part actually kind of, I think, is the same question as there's another one coming along the same lines, which is how do you update the initially installed recipe file? And
so there is a
other
recipe editor that needs to be installed. It's a standalone editor. Or for those of you that are like, Notepad and whatnot, you could actually open it in Notepad and manually edit it. But there is a GUI editor. Again, reach out to your sales team and they can help you get in contact with folks that can help get you set up and even walk you through changes and stuff, and make sure that you're setting yourself up the way you think you are.
And the other question that came in, which I believe is along the same lines, is it also possible to tune the post-publish process with different recipes?
So let me go back up here for a second. So these particular recipe files that you're seeing here, these control the publishing from Creo Illustrate to something else. If you're looking at editing the recipe file for the creation of illustration source files, it's the same method. You're using a recipe file that's following the same rules, but you're then, doing that. And you need to be careful when you do that kind of thing. Not that you can't, but Let's say I've optimized my geometry for how I want it to look to create my illustration source file. And then I apply one of these. Well, we don't know that you already optimized the geometry. So we would optimize it again, turning your bolts into bubblegum looking things that don't really represent the parts that you thought they did anymore, because we simplified the geometry again. So you want to make sure that you're doing your optimization at the right stage. And what the right stage is depends on what kind of results you're looking for, uh, where you need to do that. And again, the best way to figure that out is to, reach out to your sales team so that we can have one of our experts guide you through, to be able to understand that end to end. What does it look like? Where should you be optimizing, and where should you not be optimizing, to get the results that you're looking for? Any other
Okay,
questions?
looks like there's a couple of questions come in on the chat. In these 2D drawing editing options, is there an ability to change the perspective of a 2D object? Like if you draw a square and want it to match the perspective of the 3D line work.
So you can draw rectangles on plane. There is a grid, but we don't have any projection tools yet. That's on the big long list of things to do for 2D. So that's not quite there yet. So like if you were to have drawn out, a rectangle and made it look like a label and that kind of stuff, and that you're not going to be able to project that yet. Again, on the list of things to do, but we haven't quite got there yet. But you can draw directly to plane. You just can't project to plane yet.
Okay, and then there's one question about the sharing of the standards in Windchill. How can the standard be shared through Windchill, and how is this connected to the new PVSF file? I guess they may have missed that bit of the presentation.
So basically, you are just saving, whether it's PVSF or not, you're saving your standards file to a location in Windchill. Completely up to you where that location is, whether it's one location or multiple locations, completely up to you. Once you've done that, we remember that location for that particular standard. And then anytime you edit that standard, we save back to that, and it gets iterated as part of the Windchill process. Now on the client side, it is up to you to go in and tell Creo Illustrate where that is the one time. We still need to do some work on, allowing you to script that as part of the install, so your admins can create an install package that already knows this stuff. We're not quite there yet, but you would, in essence, say this is the location of the standard in the desktop clients, so that it knows where to go to get the standard to pull it down. The standard is still being used from your local machine. This is just a better way to share that, to be able to update the local standard on the local machine. All the rest of it within Creo Illustrate, the desktop experience is still the same. We've just added the ability to save this to Windchill, save this to a file server location, and be able to iterate it if you're using Windchill. We do want to do more sophisticated things in the future, but we do know that this is another thing that's been asked for a lot, is to be able to manage these standards. Anything else? I know we're a little bit over. I think we were only till quarter till the hour. But
chat. Okay, so there's a question on the copy transformation.
Mhm.
The copy transformation tool and copy last transformation tool, it only takes the transformation in linear direction.
Well, yeah, so it's copying the transform along the X, Y, and Z axes, whatever those are. You know, so if you moved it diagonally, there's still a movement along the X and Y. So we're copying the relative transformation between where it started and where it ended up, and understanding what movements along the X, Y, and Z axis. What are those new coordinates? And then we do a little bit of math, apply that to the new part, and move it the same direction and distance along each of the three axes to get it to that place.
I think that's it.
Excellent. I don't know, Deb, if you had any closing remarks or.
I'm all set. It's great.
We can barely hear you.
Yep. Sorry about
Oh,
that. The mic
there you
was
are.
up. Yeah, yeah. But I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. Well, in that case, thank you everyone for attending. Again, any questions that you have about Creo Illustrate, reach out through your sales team, and we'll get you connected to the right people, even if I'm the right people, and have those conversations.